My sister Lydia called me a nuisance. My mother Patricia agreed, claiming the family would finally have peace without me. I didn't argue, I just packed my bags. But when the police arrived weeks later for their fraud, they begged for my help. I just smiled. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss the fallout. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The migraine had been building for 3 days, a steady, rhythmic thumping behind my left eye that matched the beat of my heart. It was the kind of pain that made light hurt, made sound grate against my nerves, and made the very act of thinking feel like wading through wet concrete. I was sitting at the mahogany dining table, the one my late father had refinished with his own hands 20 years ago, staring down at a spread of financial spreadsheets that were bleeding red ink. "You're doing it again," a voice cut through the silence. It was sharp, nasal, and entirely lacking in empathy. I didn't look up immediately. I took a slow breath, trying to center myself, trying to push the pain aside just enough to function. When I finally raised my eyes, my sister Lydia was standing in the doorway of the dining room. She was dressed in a silk blouse that I knew cost more than my car payment, holding a glass of white wine that was technically mine, purchased for a special occasion that never seemed to arrive. "Doing what, Lydia?" I asked, my voice raspy. I hadn't spoken in hours. "Being a cloud," she said, sweeping into the room and flopping onto one of the chairs. She kicked her feet up onto the table, right next to a stack of IRS notices. "A dark, depressing storm cloud. Anthony says he can feel the negative energy radiating off you from the driveway." "Anthony doesn't live here," I reminded her, rubbing my temple. "And if he's in the driveway, tell him to move his truck. I have a client coming by tomorrow morning to drop off documents, and I don't want the entrance blocked." Lydia scoffed, taking a long sip of wine. "God, you are so uptight. It's always about work with you. Work bills, rules, don't you ever just lie, Vava?" "Someone has to pay for the wine you're drinking," I muttered, regretting it the moment the words left my lips. The air in the room shifted instantly. The casual annoyance on Lydia's face hardened into something ugly. This was the trigger. It was always the trigger. Mentioning the money I earned, the money I managed, the money that kept this house from being foreclosed on, was the cardinal sin in our household. "Oh, here we go," Lydia spat, swinging her legs down and slamming her glass onto the table. Wine sloshed over the rim, staining a quarterly report. "Saint Ava the martyr, you think just because you pay the property tax you own us. You think you own Mom." "I didn't say that," I said, trying to keep my voice level, but the migraine flared, a spike of white-hot agony. "I'm just tired, Lydia. I've been working 70-hour weeks to fix the mess Anthony made with that investment, property you two begged Mom to back. Don't bring Anthony into this." She shrieked. The shouting summoned our mother. Patricia walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 60, she still carried herself with the airs of the wealthy socialite she had been before Dad died, before the recession, before reality set in. She looked from Lydia's flushed, angry face to my exhausted, pale one. "What is happening?" Patricia demanded. "I am trying to relax and I hear screaming." "Ava is throwing money in my face again." Lydia cried, instantly shifting into victim mode. Her ability to produce tears on command was almost impressive, in a sociopathic sort of way. "She insulted Anthony, she insulted me, and she's sitting there with her stupid papers acting like she's the queen of the world." Patricia turned her gaze on me. It wasn't a look of maternal concern, it was a look of profound irritation. "Ava, really? Tonight, we are supposed to be having a nice dinner." "I'm working, Mom," I said, gesturing to the papers. "The audit notice came today, the one I warned you about 6 months ago, the one regarding the consulting fees you paid to Lydia's non-existent company." "It's not non-existent," Lydia yelled. "It's a brand." "It's a tax shelter that failed, Lydia." I snapped, my patience finally shattering under the weight of the pain and the sheer ingratitude. "And now the state wants answers." "Answers I have to invent, because you didn't keep a single receipt." Patricia slammed her hand on the table. "Enough." Silence rang in the room. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me, waiting for her to acknowledge that I was the only thing standing between them and financial ruin. I was the one who negotiated the payment plans. I was the one who talked the bank out of seizing the house last year. I was the forensic accountant who knew exactly where every penny went, and I was the one frantically trying to cover their tracks before it was too late. "I am sick of this," Patricia hissed, her voice low and venomous. She looked at me with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "Every day it is something with you. You bring this heaviness into the house. You hover over us, judging, calculating, restricting." "I'm protecting you," I whispered. "You're smothering us." Lydia shouted. "You're a nuisance, Ava, that's what you are, a miserable, controlling nuisance." I looked at my mother, pleading silently with my eyes. "Tell her she's wrong. Tell her I saved us." Patricia straightened her back. She looked at Lydia, then back at me. "She's right," Patricia said. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. "You are nothing but a nuisance, Ava. You make everything difficult. You make us feel small so you can feel big." She took a breath and then delivered the blow that would sever the cord forever. "This family would finally have peace without you. Maybe you should just go." I sat there frozen. The migraine vanished, replaced by a cold, numbing shock. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself, worse than the stress, worse than the fatigue. They weren't just ungrateful, they genuinely believed I was the problem. They believed that without my interference, their lives would be a paradise of endless spending and zero consequences. "You want me to leave?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Yes," Lydia sneered. "Leave, take your negative energy and your spreadsheets and get out. We don't need you." "Fine," I said. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I didn't list the thousands of dollars I had poured into their lives. I just stood up. I gathered the spreadsheets, every single one of them, and placed them neatly into my leather briefcase. I closed the laptop. I unplugged my charger. "Fine," I repeated. "I'll give you your peace." The process of leaving the life I had built for them was terrifyingly simple. It took me less than 45 minutes to pack the essentials. I wasn't stripping my room bare. I was taking only what I needed to survive and work. My laptop, my external hard drives. Oh, the hard drives were crucial. My monitors, my certifications, and a week's worth of clothes. My hands were shaking as I zipped up my suitcase, but it wasn't from sadness. It was adrenaline. It was the physical manifestation of a fight-or-flight response that had been suppressed for a decade. Downstairs, I could hear the television. They were watching a reality show. I could hear the clinking of wine glasses. They were celebrating. They were actually celebrating the fact that they had kicked me out. The audacity of it made me pause on the landing, my grip tightening on the handle of my suitcase until my knuckles turned white. I walked past the living room. They didn't even turn around. Anthony had arrived. I saw his hulking silhouette on the sofa next to Lydia. He had his arm draped over the back of the couch, looking like the king of a castle he hadn't paid a dime for. "Is she gone yet?" I heard Anthony ask, his voice thick with mock boredom. "She's packing," Lydia giggled, "probably stealing the towels." "Let her go," Patricia said, her voice sounding lighter than it had in years. "Tonight we breathe. Tomorrow we figure out the trust fund." I froze. The trust fund. A cold smile touched my lips. That was it. That was why this was happening now. Dad's trust. The one that was locked down tight until Mom turned 65, or until a strict set of solvency requirements were met, requirements that I, as the trustee, enforced with an iron fist. They thought that by removing the trustee physically from the house, they removed the barrier to the money. They had absolutely no idea how the law worked. They had no idea that my physical presence was irrelevant to my legal authority. But more importantly, they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was the only one who knew the passwords to the encrypted ledger that proved the family business was even legitimate enough to hold a bank account. I walked out the front door into the cool night air. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently, hearing the latch click into place. It sounded like the closing of a vault. I loaded my car, the humble sedan I drove, while Lydia leased a luxury SUV on the family dime. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looking back at the house. The lights were warm and inviting. From the outside, it looked like a happy home. Inside, it was a rot consuming itself. I drove to a motel 3 towns over. It wasn't glamorous. The carpet smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner, and the neon sign outside buzzed with an incessant, angry hum. But as I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, opening my laptop, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. Silence. Not the tense silence of a household walking on eggshells. Not the angry silence of the silent treatment. But real, unadulterated peace. My phone buzzed, a text from Lydia. "Don't think you're coming back crawling when you run out of money. We changed the locks." I stared at the screen. They changed the locks. They moved fast. Anthony must have been working on that the second I went upstairs. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Family ASSETS Doomsday. I had never intended to use it. I had built it as a frantic backup, a way to organize the chaos in case I got hit by a bus and someone else had to untangle their web of bad loans and shell companies. But now, looking at the files, the emails Patricia had sent authorizing shady transfers, the invoices Lydia had faked, the loan applications Anthony had falsified using the house as collateral, it didn't look like a backup anymore. It looked like ammunition. I wasn't going to fire yet. I was a professional. I knew that in forensic accounting, you didn't strike when you found the first error. You waited. You let the target get comfortable. You let them think they had gotten away with it, so they would get sloppy and make the mistake that couldn't be buried. "Enjoy your peace, Mom," I whispered to the empty motel room. "You're going to need all the rest you can get." To understand why walking out was so difficult, you have to understand what I left behind. I wasn't just a daughter, I was the structural integrity of the entire family. After Dad died 10 years ago, he left a complicated estate. He had been a brilliant businessman but a chaotic record keeper. Patricia, my mother, had never balanced a checkbook in her life. She was a woman who believed that money was a natural resource, like air or water. It just existed, and it was her right to consume it. When the grief fog lifted, I stepped in. I was 24, fresh out of my master's program, grieving my father, and suddenly tasked with preventing my mother from spending us into oblivion. I refinanced the mortgages. I battled the IRS over Dad's previous filings. I set up the allowances. I became the parent. And for a while, it worked. Until Lydia met Anthony. Anthony was the kind of man who wore suits that were too shiny and spoke in buzzwords he didn't understand. He called himself a developer, but in 3 years, I had never seen him develop anything other than debt. He was slick, handsome in a predatory way, and he knew exactly which buttons to push with my mother and sister. He treated Patricia like a queen, bringing her flowers, complimenting her youthfulness, and listening to her ramble for hours. In exchange, she adored him. She saw him as the son she never had, the ambitious, charming counterweight to my boring, pragmatic caution. But I saw the bank statements. I saw the loans Patricia gave him for projects that never materialized. I saw the credit card charges for dinners where he forgot his wallet. I saw the slow, parasitic drain he had attached to my family. A week after I left the house, I was settling into a small, furnished apartment downtown. It was clean, quiet, and mine. I was still working my day job at the firm, burying myself in client cases to keep my mind off the crushing loneliness that occasionally hit me at night. Then, I got the notification. As the trustee of the estate, I had alerts set up on all major accounts. My phone pinged at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. Attempted access, Family Trust main disbursement account. Location, First National Bank, downtown branch. Status, DENIED two-factor authentication required. They were at the bank. Right now. I could picture it perfectly. Anthony would be doing the talking, wearing his best suit, flashing that used car salesman's smile at the bank manager. Patricia would be sitting there looking indignant that she couldn't withdraw $50,000 on a whim. Lydia would be scrolling on her phone, bored, waiting for the cash. They thought that because I was gone, the rules were gone. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It wasn't Mom or Lydia. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. "Hello." I answered, putting the call on speaker as I typed away on my work computer. Ava, Anthony's voice came through, smooth and dripping with false concern. Hey, how are you holding up? We've been worried. What do you want, Anthony? Look, no need to be hostile. We're all family here. I'm actually calling to do you a favor. Your mom is really upset about how things ended. She wants to extend an olive branch. Is the olive branch $50,000? I asked dryly. There was a pause. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second. She needs to access the trust, Ava, just for a short-term liquidity issue. An investment opportunity came up. No, I said. You didn't even hear the pitch, he said, his voice hardening. This is big, Ava, crypto-backed securities, guaranteed 20% return within the month. I can double the estate's value. Anthony, I said, my voice flat. I audit frauds for a living. I know a Ponzi scheme when I hear one. You aren't getting a dime from the trust. The trust is for mom's long-term care, not your gambling habits. It's not gambling, he snapped. You're just jealous. You're jealous that I'm actually making moves while you count beans. Patricia is the beneficiary, Ava. It's her money. And I am the trustee, I reminded him, which means it's my decision, and the decision is no. You really want to play it like this? Anthony's voice dropped, losing all pretense of friendliness. You think you're untouchable because you have the passwords. You're just a sad, lonely woman who got kicked out of her own house. Patricia is going to petition to have you removed. We're going to tell the court you're mentally unstable, that you're stealing. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands remained steady on the keyboard. Go ahead, Anthony. Petition the court. Open that door. But remember, if you invite the law into our lives, they look at everything. Are you sure you want anyone looking at your tax returns? Silence, heavy, suffocating silence. You'll regret this, he snarled. I doubt it, I said and hung up. I stared at the phone. They were desperate. Desperate people did stupid things. Anthony was going to try to bypass me. He was going to try to find another way to get that money, and since he couldn't get it legally from the trust, he was going to have to steal it. He had just threatened me with legal action, but he had no idea that he had just given me the signal I was waiting for. They were accelerating. I opened my laptop again. I pulled up the monitoring software for the localized server I had set up in the house years ago, the one they were too tech-illiterate to even know existed. I could see the traffic on the home network. They were downloading tax software. They were searching for how to forge trustee signature. They were Googling offshore accounts. I sat back in my chair, a grim sense of determination settling over me. They wanted a war. They wanted to paint me as the villain. Fine, I would be the villain, but I would be the most meticulous, well-documented villain they had ever met. My apartment became my war room. The silence I had initially found peaceful now hummed with the quiet intensity of focus. Anthony's threat to petition for my removal as trustee wasn't idle. A week after our call, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my office. It was a formal notice from a lawyer I'd never heard of, likely one of Anthony's connections, alleging mismanagement of funds and demanding an immediate freeze on my authority. I didn't panic. Panic is for people who don't have receipts. Instead, I called my mentor, Mr. Henderson. He was a retired partner at my firm, a man who had taught me everything I knew about forensic accounting and had seen more corporate fraud than the SEC. They're moving faster than I expected, I told him over coffee the next morning, sliding the legal notice across the table. He scanned the document, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. Sloppy. This lawyer is citing statutes that were repealed 5 years ago. This isn't a legal strategy, Ava, it's a distraction. A distraction from what? I asked, though a cold knot was already forming in my stomach. From whatever they're doing while you're busy fighting this, he said, tapping the paper. If they can tie you up in court for a few months, get a temporary injunction. That's all the time a desperate man needs to drain an account if he has the right access. But he doesn't have access, I insisted. The trust is locked, two-factor authentication. My signature is required for any withdrawal over $5,000. And your mother? Henderson asked gently. Does she have any accounts that aren't in the trust? Any personal savings, retirement funds, equity in the house? The blood drained from my face. The house. The house wasn't in the trust. It was the one asset Dad had left entirely to Mom, free and clear, because he wanted her to always feel secure. It was worth nearly $2 million in the current market. And because I had been so focused on protecting the liquid cash in the trust, I had assumed the house was safe simply because Mom would never sell her dream home. But Mom wasn't thinking clearly, and Anthony was desperate. I left the coffee shop and drove straight to the county recorder's office. My heart hammered against my ribs the entire way. I didn't need a lawyer for this. Public records were my playground. I pulled the file for our address. My hands shook as I scanned the recent activity. There it was, recorded 3 days ago. A home equity line of credit HELOC. Amount $450,000. Lender, Sunrise Capital LLC. A quick search on my phone revealed it was a predatory lender known for high-interest loans to distressed borrowers. Signatures, Patricia Thorne, and a witness signature that was an illegible scrawl. I felt sick. They hadn't touched the trust because they couldn't. So they had convinced my mother to leverage her home, her safety net, for nearly $500,000. And given Anthony's investment opportunity, that money was as good as gone. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the document. I could stop this. I could call Mom, scream at her, tell her she was being conned. I could drive over there and physically intervene. But then I remembered her voice. You are nothing but a nuisance. This family would finally have peace without you. If I intervened now, I would just be the controlling daughter again. I would be the one ruining Anthony's sure thing. They would hate me for saving them. No, I needed more than just a bad loan to stop Anthony. I needed proof of intent. I needed to know exactly where that money was going. I went back to my apartment and opened my laptop. I logged into the shared family cloud account, the one they used to back up their phones, the one I paid for and administered. They had kicked me out of the house, but they hadn't kicked me out of the digital ecosystem. I watched the backup sync. Photos of expensive dinners, screenshots of crypto charts, and then a series of emails between Anthony and a man named Marcus. Subject, wire instructions body. Once the HELOC clears, send the $400K to this account in the Caymans. We can wash it through the Shell Corp and bring it back as investment returns in 6 months. She won't know a thing. My breath hitched. This wasn't just bad investment advice. This was money laundering. Anthony wasn't just losing Mom's money, he was stealing it, moving it offshore, and planning to wash it back to make himself look like a genius. I had him. But I needed to let the transaction happen. I needed the wire transfer to initiate. The moment that money left the U.S. banking system, it became a federal crime. I closed my laptop, my hands trembling. I wasn't just a sister anymore. I was a witness building a case. 2 weeks later, the inevitable crash began. I knew the money had moved. I had seen the wire confirmation in the cloud backup. Anthony had sent $400,000 to the Cayman account. He had left Mom with $50,000 to live on and a massive monthly loan payment she couldn't afford. I decided it was time to visit. Not to save them, but to offer them one last chance to confess before I took what I had to the authorities. I pulled up to the house on a Sunday afternoon. Anthony's truck was there, shiny and new, likely leased with the initial disbursement. I knocked. Lydia answered, looking disheveled and smug. Well, look who it is, she sneered, leaning against the doorframe. Run out of money already. We aren't taking you back, Ava. Mom is finally happy. I'm not here to move back in, I said, my voice calm. I'm here to talk to Mom. And Anthony. They're busy, Lydia said, moving to close the door. Tell them I know about the Caymans, I said. Lydia froze. The color drained from her face. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew the tone. It was the tone of someone who held all the cards. She stepped back, and I walked past her into the living room. Mom and Anthony were on the couch, looking at swatches for new curtains. The denial was breathtaking. Ava. Mom looked up, annoyed. I thought we made it clear. I know about the HELOC, Mom, I interrupted. standing in the center of the room. I know you borrowed $450,000 against the house. Mom flinched, looking at Anthony. Anthony stood up, his face darkening. That's private financial business, Ava. You have no right. And I know you wired $400,000 of it to an account in the Cayman Islands yesterday, I continued, locking eyes with him. Account number ending in 8842. Beneficiary, Apex Holdings Limited, which, coincidentally, was incorporated 3 weeks ago by a registered agent who shares an office address with your old college roommate. The room went dead silent. Anthony looked like he had been punched in the gut. Mom looked confused. What is she talking about, Anthony? Mom asked, her voice trembling slightly. You said the money was in the high-yield bond market. She's lying, Anthony shouted, pointing a finger at me. She's hacking us. That's illegal, Ava. I'll have you arrested for cyberstalking. I didn't hack anything, I said calmly. You backed up your phone to the family cloud, the one I pay for, the one I administer. You sent the wire instructions from your iPhone, Anthony. It's all there. I pulled a folder from my bag and tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. Copies of the emails, the wire confirmation, the incorporation documents for the shell company. It's all there, Mom. He's not investing your money, he's stealing it. Mom stared at the folder. She reached out a shaking hand, but Anthony snatched it away before she could touch it. Don't listen to her, Patricia. Anthony yelled, his composure shattering. She's trying to sabotage us. She's jealous because I'm going to make you rich and she just wanted to keep you on a budget. These are fake. She forged them. Why would I forge documents to save you from ruin? I asked Mom, ignoring him. I'm the nuisance, remember. I'm the one you wanted gone. I could have let you lose the house. I could have let you default on that loan in 3 months when the payments start. But I'm here, giving you a chance. A chance for what? Lydia demanded, stepping into the room, to come back and control us. No, I said. A chance to call the bank right now, report the fraud, and try to reverse the wire. If you do it today, you might get some of it back. If you wait, it's gone. Mom looked at Anthony. He was sweating now, pacing back and forth. Patricia, baby, don't look at me like that. You know me. You know I love you. Ava has always hated me. She's trying to break us up. Is the money in the bond market, Anthony? Mom asked, her voice small. It's in a diversified portfolio. He stammered. Offshore is it's for tax efficiency. It's smart. It's laundering, I said. Get out. Anthony screamed, advancing on me. Get out of this house. You're trespassing. Patricia, tell her to leave. Mom looked at the folder in Anthony's hand, then at his desperate, angry face. Then she looked at me. I saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear. But then I saw something else, pride. The refusal to admit she had been wrong. The refusal to admit that her piece was a lie. You should go, Ava, she whispered. Mom, look at the papers, I pleaded. I said go. She shrieked, suddenly finding her voice. You come in here with your accusations and your negativity. Anthony loves this family. You just want to destroy it. I stared at her. She was choosing the lie. Even with the truth staring her in the face, she preferred the comfortable lie over the painful reality that she had been played. Okay, I said, my voice hardening. I tried, remember that. I turned and walked out. As I reached the door, I heard Anthony muttering, crazy bitch. Don't worry, Patricia, I'll handle it. I got into my car. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, cold clarity. I had done my duty. I had offered them a lifeline. They had used it to try and hang me. Now I was done protecting them. Now I was going to protect myself. The fallout was immediate, but not in the way they expected. 2 days after my visit, I received a cease and desist letter from Anthony's lawyer, demanding I return stolen proprietary documents and threatening a lawsuit for defamation. It was a bluff, a desperate attempt to silence me. I responded by forwarding the entire digital trail to the IRS whistleblower office and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. But Anthony wasn't done. He knew I was the threat, so he tried to discredit me. He started posting on social media. vague, passive-aggressive status updates about toxic family members and jealousy. Lydia joined in, posting videos crying about how her sister abandoned them and stole family heirlooms. It was a smear campaign, and it was working, locally at least. Friends of the family stopped liking my posts. My aunt called me, demanding to know why I was attacking my poor mother. "I'm not attacking her, Aunt Carol," I said, tiredly. "I'm trying to stop her from losing her house." "Anthony says you're making up lies because you were cut out of the will," she snapped. I hung up. They had circled the wagons. Anthony had convinced them all that I was the villain. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking on the money. My contacts at the bank, friends I had made over a decade of professional work, alerted me, unofficially, of course, that the Apex Holdings account had flagged a suspicious activity report. The money was moving again, bouncing through shell companies in Panama and Cyprus. Anthony was trying to hide it deep, but he made a mistake. A classic, arrogant mistake. He used the debit card associated with the Cayman account to pay for a business trip. I saw the charge pop up in the cloud backup he still hadn't disconnected. The Ritz-Carlton, Miami, $3,500. Flight, first class, 2 tickets. Passenger names, Anthony DeMarco and Lydia Thorne. He wasn't just stealing from Mom, he was taking Lydia with him. They were spending Mom's house money on a luxury vacation while she sat at home, believing they were at a business conference. This was it. This was the wedge. I printed the itinerary. I printed the hotel receipt. And I printed the bank statement showing the funds being drained for travel expenses. I didn't go to the house this time. I knew Mom wouldn't listen. I needed a bigger stage. I needed witnesses. Mom's 60th birthday party was scheduled for that Saturday. It was being held at the local country club, an event Lydia had insisted on, funded, of course, by the remaining scraps of the HELOC money. Everyone would be there. The extended family, Mom's bridge club, the neighbors. It was the perfect place for a murder, a social murder. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I organized the evidence into a sleek, professional presentation. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to present the facts like the forensic accountant I was. On the morning of the party, I received a text from Lydia. "Don't even think about coming tonight. You aren't invited." I didn't reply. I just put on my best suit, sharp, black, tailored. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the tired, migraine-ridden daughter who had walked out a month ago. She was cold. She was precise. She was dangerous. I drove to the country club. The parking lot was full. I could hear the music from the ballroom. I walked past the reception desk. The security guard, an old friend named Mike who knew me from years of organizing Mom's events, nodded at me. "Evening, Ms. Ava. Good to see you." "You too, Mike," I said. "Keep the doors clear. I have a feeling people might be leaving early." I walked into the ballroom. The room was bathed in soft, golden light. Mom was at the head table, looking radiant in a silver gown, laughing at something Anthony was whispering in her ear. Lydia was next to them, holding a glass of champagne, scanning the room for admiration. They looked like the perfect, happy family, the family that had finally found peace. I walked to the microphone stand near the DJ booth. The music was loud, a generic jazz standard. I signaled the DJ, a kid I had hired for 3 previous parties, to cut the track. The music died. A hush fell over the room. Heads turned. Mom froze, her glass halfway to her lips. Anthony's smile vanished. Lydia stood up, her eyes widening in horror. "What is she doing here?" Lydia hissed, loud enough for the front tables to hear. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice amplified and steady. "I apologize for the interruption. I know I wasn't invited tonight. But as my mother's former financial caretaker, I felt it was my duty to deliver one final gift." "Security," Anthony shouted, standing up. "Get her out of here." "Sit down, Anthony," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "Unless you want me to read the indictment numbers out loud right now." The word indictment hung in the air. The room buzzed with whispers. "Mom," I said, turning to look directly at her, "you told me I was a nuisance. You told me you wanted peace. But peace doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from truth." I reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of papers. This is the truth about your house, your loan, and your peace. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. You could hear the hum of the HVAC system and the nervous clinking of silverware against china. I stood near the DJ booth, the papers in my hand feeling heavier than their physical weight. "Ava, please," Mom said, her voice trembling. "Not here. Don't ruin this." "I'm not ruining it, Mom," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the speakers. "I'm saving what's left of it." I walked toward the head table. I didn't rush. I moved with the deliberate pace of someone approaching a witness stand. "Security!" Anthony yelled again, his face turning a mottled red. He looked around the room, frantic. "She's trespassing. Get her out." Mike, the security guard I'd spoken to earlier, stepped into the doorway. He looked at me, then at Anthony. He crossed his arms and stayed put. "The police are on their way, Anthony," I said calmly, "but they aren't coming for me." "You're bluffing," Lydia shrieked, standing up so abruptly her chair tipped over. "You're just jealous because we're happy, because we're thriving without you." I stopped at the edge of the dance floor, 10 feet from where my family sat like royalty in a crumbling kingdom. I held up the first document. "This is a copy of the home equity line of credit application for Mom's house," I announced to the room. "Forged signature, dated 3 weeks ago. Amount, $450,000. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Mom's friends, the bridge club ladies, exchanged horrified looks. "That's a lie," Anthony shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "That was an investment loan." "Patricia signed it willingly." "Did she?" I asked, turning to my mother. She looked small, shrunken in her expensive gown. "Mom, did you know you signed away almost $500,000 of your home's equity?" Mom stared at the tablecloth. He said it was just paperwork for the trust, to move assets." "He lied," I said, "and here is where the money went." I held up the second document. Wire transfer, $400,000 to Apex Holdings in the Cayman Islands, a shell company set up by a college friend of Anthony S. Anthony was sweating profusely now. He looked like a trapped animal. "It's an offshore investment vehicle. It's standard practice for high-net-worth individuals." "And this." I held up the third document, the hotel receipt and flight itinerary. "Is this standard practice, Anthony? A first-class trip to the Ritz-Carlton in Miami for you and Lydia next week, booked using the debit card from that exact offshore account." The room exploded. Lydia's face went white. She looked at Anthony, then at the paper in my hand. "What? No, that's for a conference, a business conference." "A business conference with a couple's massage package and a private cabana rental." I read from the invoice. "And look at the date, Lydia. It's the same week Mom is scheduled for her knee surgery. The surgery you told her you couldn't drive her to because you were swamped with work." Mom slowly turned her head. She looked at Lydia. The betrayal in her eyes was devastating. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about loyalty. "Lydia," Mom whispered, "you said you had inventory to manage." Lydia stammered, looking from Mom to Anthony. He told me it was a networking event. He said we could write it off." "He's using you, Lydia," I said, my voice softening slightly. "Just like he's using Mom. He's draining the accounts, and he's going to leave you holding the bag when the IRS comes knocking. And they will come knocking. I sent them everything this morning." Anthony's eyes went wide. He lunged across the table, grabbing a steak knife. "You bitch, you ruined everything." The crowd screamed. Mike, the security guard, was moving instantly, rushing toward the table. But before Anthony could even get around the table, Mom stood up. She didn't look frail anymore. She looked like the woman who had raised me, the woman who had buried a husband and survived. She picked up her glass of red wine, a heavy, expensive Cabernet, and threw the contents directly into Anthony's face. "Get out," she said. Her voice was low, shaking with rage. Anthony sputtered, wiping wine from his eyes. "Patricia, listen." I said get out. She screamed, a sound so raw and primal it silenced the entire room. "You stole from me. You lied to me. You turned me against my own daughter." She turned to Lydia. "And you You knew. You were going on vacation with my money while I went under the knife. Mom, I didn't know. Lydia sobbed, reaching for her. I swear, he told me it was business. Don't touch me, Mom hissed, pulling away. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. I looked at Anthony. He heard them too. He looked at the exits, then at me. You'll pay for this, Ava, he snarled, backing away. You'll never work in this town again. I don't need to work in this town, Anthony, I said, watching the flashing blue lights reflect off the ballroom windows. I have a national reputation. You, however, are about to become very famous in the federal prison system. 2 police officers and a detective in a suit walked into the ballroom. The detective scanned the room and locked eyes with me. I pointed at Anthony. Anthony DeMarco. The detective asked, approaching the table. This is a misunderstanding. Anthony yelled as they grabbed his arms. My lawyer will have your badges. Patricia, tell them. Mom didn't say a word. She just watched as they handcuffed him and marched him out past the stunned guests, past the ruin of her birthday party. Lydia was sobbing into her hands at the table. The guests were whispering, some leaving, others staring in morbid fascination. I stood there, feeling the adrenaline begin to fade, replaced by a deep, exhausting sadness. I had won. But looking at my mother, broken and humiliated in her silver gown, it didn't feel like a victory. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and quiet devastation. Anthony was denied bail. The evidence I provided, the wire transfers, the emails, the shell company registration, was overwhelming. He was facing multiple counts of wire fraud, elder abuse, and money laundering. It turned out he had done this before in 2 other states under slightly different names. He was a predator, plain and simple. I didn't move back home. I visited Mom at the house a week later. It was quiet. The peace she had wanted was finally there, but it was the heavy, suffocating peace of an empty nest. Lydia was upstairs in her room, depressed and refusing to speak to anyone, her brand ruined by the scandal. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea. The table where she had told me to leave was now covered in legal paperwork I was helping her navigate, but from a distance. I'm sorry, Ava, Mom said, staring into her mug. I know that's not enough, but I am. I know, Mom, I said gently. I let him make me think you were the enemy, she whispered. Because you made me face reality, and he made me feel like I didn't have to. Reality is hard, I said, but it's better than losing everything. Will you come back? She asked, looking up with hopeful, tear-filled eyes. We can fix up your room. She's going to therapy. We can be a family again. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the spot where I had spent 10 years managing their lives, absorbing their stress, and being called a nuisance for my trouble. I loved them. I would always love them, but I had tasted freedom. I had tasted respect. No, Mom, I said softly. She flinched, hurt. But we need you. You have me, I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I'll always be your daughter. I'll help you find a fee-only financial planner who can manage the estate objectively. I'll help you set up a budget, but I can't be your keeper anymore. And I can't live here. Where will you go? I was offered a partnership at a firm in Chicago, I said. It was true. The offer had come yesterday from a colleague who had heard about my forensic prowess in uncovering the fraud. I'm going to take it. Mom looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. She saw the strength in my face, the calm confidence that had replaced the anxious exhaustion. You deserve it, she said, squeezing my hand. A tear rolled down her cheek. You really do. Thank you, I said. I left the house an hour later. I walked to my car, the same sedan I had packed my life into that night. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the driveway. As I drove away, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I looked forward to the open road, to Chicago, to a life that was finally, truly mine. The migraine was gone. The silence in the car wasn't lonely anymore. It was the sound of a new beginning.